So my name is Michael Deza, and for the past 6 years I had been focused on doing marathons. Biggest goal was to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and after enough years in trial and error, finally was able to pull it off. I kept pushing myself in running until I reached a point to where the biggest goal that was next to accomplish was the Olympic trials. And when I took a look at what my best marathon time was and what was needed of me, I felt like it was too big of a gap. So I kind of went through this lull trying to figure out what I could do, what challenge could I embrace again that would kind of put me in this drive like it did whenever I first started marathoning. So I had a brother that gave me a free guest pass to his gym down in San Diego, and the very first time that I did bouldering with him, I got hooked onto climbing, and I began just to see just what the world of climbing had to offer. I had a friend that told me that she was signing up for a half marathon. Without any training, I signed up for the same marathon as she did, and from that very first race, I got really hooked on it. I liked the challenge, enduring and overcoming something, and the Boston Marathon was pretty much something that was spoken whenever I would meet up at running clubs. I had seen this kind of like a opportunity to kind of prove to myself that I had what it took to do something really exceptional. Growing up and being diagnosed with ADHD definitely was more of like a stigma than it was a handicap. And so I kind of felt like this goal of qualifying for Boston was a way to kind of validate myself. I'd been spending, 6 years trying to go after it. So every year I would do a handful of marathons. And when I lined up for the 2015 Modesto Marathon, it felt different. There was nerves, but there was also a certain kind of calmness, being okay with not knowing. I remember running the first 13 miles, kind of looking at my running watch and seeing my pace being within the Boston qualifying time. And I remember mile 18, my body just bumped, hit the wall. I started panicking, just like freaking out. I was trying to search for some kind of way to regain composure. And my mind had come to this memory of my mother holding me as a child. Times where I would just feel like overwhelmed and she would just pick me up and would hold me and had this comforting feeling. It's kind of like an angel just like wrapping its wings around me. I remember the words that she would say to me that would calm me down, and I began saying those words to myself, and I found myself regaining composure. When I had reached about the 22nd mile of the marathon, I knew for certain that I was going to qualify. So those last miles that I ran, it was as if they were effortless. And that experience was really interesting because all this time I was trying to prove myself. What allowed me to break through, it was the power of love and accepting that kind of love. And whenever I had lined up for the Boston Marathon, it was more of a feeling of celebrating, being a part of this group, not only like qualifying for the Elite Boston Marathon, but being put in the same corral as the elites that I had looked up to. It was as if the kid inside of me was able to see that he had all along inside of him the potential to do great things, and that this was a way of just confirming it. So the first experience with climbing, it was like being a kid exploring something that I had no idea existed. Looking at these indoor climbing routes and having this sense of wonder, like what are all these holds for and why is there no rope? That was something for me that was intriguing. I guess the sense of risk that with bouldering, you're only having a pair of shoes on you. You're just going to climb up this wall. If you can't make it, you're going to take a fall. The more that I did it, the more my mind began to figure things out. Got excited that it was connecting the dots, understanding certain movements, piecing climb together. Climbing definitely required a lot more power than running. I was so used to training in an aerobic state, using my legs mostly. When I came into running, it was this whole new world of developing strength, power, dynamic power. It was like being a student again. The terrain for climbing was much different. With running, I had to read the trail. With climbing, it was about reading a route. As a runner, it was one foot in front of the other, controlling pace, but the movement was pretty simple. It was forward motion. Climbing, it was about understanding how to do these subtle movements, placing a foot, down turning it, grabbing a hold with your hand, moving in a certain way, straight pull down, or like a Gaston where you're pulling to the side. All these types of movements were just so new to me that I had to take time to understand this and for it to feel comfortable. In a way, it was like learning to speak a new language. The first time that I went to this place called Salt Point, it's this group of rocks that are just off the coast of Highway 1, about 3 hours north of San Francisco. I remember a friend had taken me there, and I was just blown away at the sights. You just had the Pacific Ocean just right in front of you, and about 50 feet before the ocean were these boulders. I remember climbing up on these boulders and coming across this one in particular that other climbers were struggling to try to solve it. I put my hands on it, tried to give a couple moves. I immediately sensed a great challenge, similar to the feeling of the Boston Marathon. And it's this boulder problem that is called the slab. The first few attempts of trying it, I could definitely sense within me that this was going to be one that was worthwhile. It was going to provide a sense of meaning. At this time that I had first attempted to climb the slab, I had been climbing for, say, about a year. For this kind of climb, the rating scale was a V5, an intermediate type of difficulty. But in outdoors, that kind of difficulty is a few steps above indoor. The holds are smaller, you're dealing with real rock, so it's more intense on your fingers and on your body. And so for me coming into this, you could say that this climb was a defining moment. For the past year I'd been climbing, advancing well on beginner to intermediate routes, but this was a climb that had shut me down my first attempts at it, and because it was that difficult, I felt that it was something worth putting my time and training into. Climbing the slab for the first time, it was like getting kicked in the face. It was so difficult just to even get on the route. You had this really small left pincher hold, but like this wide, that you had to flip your left hand and pinch it with, and then you had a side pull with your right hand that you had to grab upside down. But then on top of that, you had no footholds. So you basically had to smear your feet on the rock surface that was it was very steep, almost vertical. This puts you in this lie-back angle that was you leaning back this much. So that very first move was something that had shut me down. The moment you get on the boulder, you're underneath this roof-like section. So you have to hang on for dear life when your right hand leaves to go for that throw. And I couldn't fathom it because I couldn't even get the first move. After the climb, I went back home and began training, trying to find routes that would have similar style, would have a requirement to be strong and dynamic. Began to research about cross-training exercises that were going to develop strength in the core, in the shoulders, in the forearms and fingers. It became a lot more focus-driven in the same way that whenever I had set my goal to qualify for Boston, I began to run differently. Things had more structure, and I put more intention behind it. I began to find a sense of focus and purpose because of this climb. After enough time invested in it, I was ready to make the drive back up to Salt Point and attempt to climb again. Going back the second time, there were nerves, but there was this sense of just letting whatever happen happen. So I would visualize me sending the climb, but also not holding on too tight to it because I knew that there were forces that were much bigger than me at work. And so it may not be the day. The conditions may be less than. The rock may have changed. It may have eroded more. The holds may feel different. So whatever happened would happen. Making the drive up, I was just visualizing the moves over and over again. It just kept replaying. Began my day at Salt Point, getting out of the car, putting the crash pad on my back, and I could feel the reality much stronger with every step leading towards the boulder, and eventually just being right before it and just being like, well, there it is. No excuses, no going back. Let's see if you got it. When I first started the climb, there was a handful of failures. On the attempt that was successful, making it to the top, there was this feeling, combination of like joy and peace. I had kind of imagined that I would get to the top and just start like howling, like so excited. But when I got to the top, it was like just happy that I completed it and kind of just soaking in that. To finally put all of that training and dedication and have it pay off, it was like coming full circle. I had received something in return. I had felt like something had been given back to me. I had received something in return. After sending it, I definitely began thinking of future projects. The feeling of completing a climb and completing a marathon definitely have a very strong similarity. To get the climb, it brought a sense of meaning back to me. Something as strong as qualifying for the Boston Marathon. And it could be that the difficulty of climb wasn't something that I had to dedicate years to. And I think it's because of Boston taking several years to do that it remains to be a very vivid memory. I still remember sending the slap and the feeling that I had, but I think it's because putting more time into qualifying for the Boston Marathon, it has a stronger effect or impact on me. And I get the feeling that future climbs that I'll come across, I'll eventually come face to face with a climb that draws me to put myself into it for months or years. And it'll just take time to finally come across that kind of climb.